we know from different sources that sporadic or not sporadic, isolated chanting, yeah, or recitation were performed during the Buddha's time to commit to memory, and also as a means of the oral tradition, where teachings are transmitted from teacher to student. First from the Buddha to those disciples who learn from him directly, and subsequently down to the next generation. Yeah. Eventually this chanting became more formalized. Yeah. And today this practice is done not just to commit teachings to memory. This remains true, but on top of that, it serves to develop devotion and faith. I've explained in various classes on different occasions. For example, if you look at the recitation that we do, it includes verses in praise of the Buddha, yeah, Buddha Vandana. No? If you turn to page 5, just now we recited Iti Piso, Bhagava, and so on. Yeah, today, in many Theravadan tradition, they fondly refer to this as Iti Piso. Yeah, yeah. Many times you ask them, do you recite Buddha Vandana? They may look at you like, Then you ask them, do you recite Iti Piso? Yeah. Oh, I know. Iti Piso, I know. Yeah, but actually Iti Piso is part of the verse. The proper term of this whole section is Buddha Vandana. It is a collection of 9 of the epithets that were commonly said about the Buddha. That means people describe the Buddha in this way. You can actually find this collection, sometimes the full 9, sometimes some of them mentioned in different suttas. He would say, once the Buddha was at Kosala. There was a village called, there was a town called Kalama. There were the Kalama, and they heard that the Buddha was in town. And some of them said, this has been said about this Gotama ascetic. He is an Arahant. He is a blessed one. He is this, he is that. And the whole set of description is basically what we are reciting now. You know? So we are, in a way, reenacting what was said in the past. Now, so this part is less about the teachings, less about the teachings, but to develop devotion and faith. Yeah? But for what purpose? Because we don't know the Buddha so intimately. Did you all have coffee with the Buddha last week? Anyone? No, So how do we know about the Buddha? We know him, one way is by reciting these verses. Because these verses, if you again look at page 5, the Buddhist library under Bhante Dhammaratana, he has very kindly put in the Chinese and English translation on the right panel, which is why I have shared with you all before. When you come in earlier, take the time to read through what you're going to recite. Otherwise, it becomes a very spiritual thing, but it doesn't have the full impact. When you chant Iti Piso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Vijacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavido Anuttaro Purisa Dhammasarati Satta Deva Manusanam Buddho Bhagavati. Oh, it feels very... If you go to the, let's say, Thai tradition, then the way they chant is more or less the same, but with slightly different intonation. I remember in the 80s, I mentioned many times, you know the Gong Tao movie? Then they always, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sam. Then when I was a kid, like him, I feel like, power, 来了. You know? Yeah, but that's the Namo Tassa. But imagine if instead of doing it that way, right, then they come in, then they say, homage to him, the blessed one, the worthy one, the perfectly enlightened one. Then it's like, where's the power? So the intonation works on our emotional part. But if you only do that and you only feel that, then you only have the one-sided faith. Because faith, there's one part of the faith which cannot be helped, is based on emotion. You hear a Bante chanting, you hear a Fa Si chanting, you know my favorite, Ru. Yeah. Yeah. Then you feel very inspired, you know. Wow, some people when they go for chanting, they even cry. It serves that purpose. But it is supposed to also serve the other purpose, which is you chant knowing what you're chanting. Because then this leads to wisdom, understanding, clarity, and this develops the other side of faith. Yeah. In Buddhism, faith has many facets. If you only have the first type of faith, that's a good start, but not a good end. Yeah. It must evolve into faith with understanding. That you have faith because you understand, not that you understand because you have faith. And that understanding comes from wisdom. But chanting can help to lead us towards that. The other purpose today in chanting is to, in short, develop some form of concentration. It can help you to develop some form of concentration. How does it work? You see, the trouble is, sometimes when it comes to religion, people don't like everything to be explained, you know. You like to just feel a bit mystical, more interesting. Yeah, but what to do? You choose this Sifu, everything explained. When you do chanting, if you chant out loud or you chant inside your mind, both occupies your mind. It occupies your mind. And by occupying your mind, it interrupts your discursive thoughts. It interrupts your discursive thoughts. But this works only if you put in the effort. What do I mean by that? Initially, when you learn chanting, you put in effort because you're not familiar. When you're not familiar and you want to do it properly, you need to put in effort. So initially, you don't really know the chanting, so you must look at the text, and you don't even know how to pronounce, don't know where to stop, don't know where to, so you pay attention with your ear to listen to Sifu's chanting. Then Sifu chant wrong, you also chant wrong. Then you try to pronounce it correctly, or iti piso, or then later supatipano, you really follow. So if you notice, initial part, when you're doing chanting, you really don't think of anything else. But after a few years, steady already, memorize the whole book. Iti piso bhagava araham samma sambuddho vijacharana sampanno sugato lokavido anutaro purisa dhammasarati satta deo. Then I really know. Then unfortunately, this is not the fault of chanting. This is the fault of the chanter. Yeah. I ever noticed before last time in temple, sometimes the amma, but some amma, some I don't know which one, some. Yeah, people chanting, then sometimes there are breaks or what, then the amma sit down there chanting. Amito, wow, one time chanting can scold people, you know. Yeah, So this is the fault of a chanter, not chanting itself. Unfortunately, we tend to lump them together. So chanting can help in all this. Oh. So if you look at this, this actually can lead to wisdom. And if you practice chanting properly, while chanting, your body shouldn't be doing other things that is unwholesome. So your bodily action is somewhat purified. Your verbal is also purified because you are chanting either the names of the Buddhas, which usually represents wholesome qualities, or you are chanting the words of truth that the Buddha has said before, so it's wholesome as well. And if you put in effort, your mind, at least during that point in time, is purified because it's not involved in unwholesome habitual thoughts. So during chanting, you can purify nominally your body and speech, and to some extent your mind. And if your mind is sufficiently purified, you can develop concentration. And so as a result, you have your body, you have your speech, and you have your mind purified. And if you understand the teachings, it leads to right view, which develops wisdom. So chanting can cover the whole spectrum of the threefold practice. The challenge is whether we as the chanter really fulfill the whole thing and not Namo Tassa Bhagavata